My name's Heather from the World Bank. I am going to be starting this session on garter stitch. In the last session, we casted on our first row of stitches. And the very beginning steps of this, all you need is a pair of needles and a ball of yarn. We'll get started with garter stitch. And basically, this is a very simple stitch pattern. And in this case, since we're knitting straight, it's just knitting completely across the row, and then we'll have to turn your work and then knit across the row again. And when you knit on the wrong side of the work, you always have a right side and a wrong side of the work. When you knit on the wrong side, you're making a purl stitch on the right side. So that creates the garter stitch pattern, and we'll show you that a little bit more close up in a second. Okay, so like I mentioned, these are our 30 stitches that we cast on in the last session. And then you see the two ends of your yarn here. One is the tail, and since they're kind of long, you may want to cut this so you don't get them confused, but not too short, maybe like about 5 inches. This is the tail. You don't want to knit with this. You want to knit with the strand of yarn that's attached to the ball of yarn. So as long as you kind of keep that to the right side, that's a little helpful. And then I usually move this over to the left so I don't use it by accident. And then you start with your extra needle that doesn't have any yarn on it. I hold the needle with the row, my first row on the left side, and my empty needle on the right side. And to start, we're going to do just a basic knit stitch. So you stick the needle into the front leg of your stitch, then you wrap your working yarn, which is the yarn that's attached to the ball, around your right needle from back to front, and then you pull the needle through, and then see this hole you've made? You want to grab onto this leg of your working yarn and pull it through, and then once you have that secure, you drop the original stitch on your left needle. So you pull it up and drop it over the side, and then you want to tighten up a little. Don't pull too tight or else it'll be hard to work with. And then you have your first stitch on your right hand needle. So this is going to be a new row you're making. So we'll show that again. So you go into the front leg of your stitch, wrap the working yarn around the right needle, pull it through the gap, and then you drop the stitch on the left needle. Tighten up everywhere, and you can see that your work is growing. So we'll kind of speed through the next couple of stitches and check back in at the end. You're basically just knitting totally across this row until you reach the last stitch, and then we'll show you what to do from there. Make a stitch, you're moving it from the left needle to the right side. And then there's multiple ways you can do this. I'm holding the yarn what's called English style, so I hold the yarn with my right hand, but some people hold the yarn with their left hand. It's all the same motion, or all the same, process, but it's just where you're holding the yarn may differ. And then there's, multiple different styles. There's Japanese style. But to begin, I'm showing you what's called the English style, holding the yarn with your right hand. So I'll show you another one in slow motion. I put the needle in this stitch on the left, wrap my yarn around the right needle, pull through the gap, holding on to the yarn, and then you drop the stitch on your left needle. Tighten things up. And then we've done the same knit stitch all the way through this row. So this is the row of yarn, and we're gonna just do it all the way to the end. So the last two I'm gonna knit as well. And then there's nothing different about the last stitch. You're gonna knit into it, move it over And then you now have a free needle again, and all your stitches are on the right needle. And you can see it's grown a little in length, and every time you make a row, this will get longer and longer. You have to get back into kind of the starting position from the beginning. So to do that, you just need to turn, like move this needle to your left hand, and now we're on the wrong side of the work. And then since I have my free needle again, I put that into my right hand. And then we just start from the beginning. My working yarn is on the left side when you begin, and then I'm just going to knit the first stitch. And in more advanced sessions we could learn how to start this row differently, but that'll be down the line. So you wrap your yarn around the right needle, you pull through the hole you've made, and you drop the stitch on the left needle. Tighten up, especially on the first stitch, you want to make sure you get it kind of tight. I'm going to tighten it again here. Wrap around through this gap, drop the stitch. And then, so as you go through, you're again just knitting totally down this row, and then as you get used to it and into a rhythm, you probably won't even need to like tug the yarn at the end. You'll just naturally be pulling it like in the motion of your knitting, so that'll improve your tension over time. Whereas if you're tugging some stitches and then not like tightening up other ones, your yarn can look a little messy and a little inconsistent. So the main thing is just to try and be consistent whether you're knitting loosely or tightly, but these are things you'll learn more about down the line. So I'll continue on and I'll get all the way to the end of this row, and then you'll be able to see a little bit more what garter stitch actually looks like once you have a little bit more fabric to work with. So as I'm approaching the end of the row, I thought of something else as well. As you're getting like moving through the piece, especially if you have a longer row of stitches, your yarn may tend to get wound around your needle a little, but you want to kind of just make sure that all your end stitches are facing the same direction. So typically, to keep track of this, I just always have them pointing towards the middle of my needles. Just keep them all on that side, and then I can see what I'm doing better. So you just want to keep it from twisting too much, or it can get kind of confusing, or you could knit into the wrong spot. But again, to finish this row, we'll just knit these last two stitches, wrap the yarn around your right needle, pull through here, drop the left stitch, and then nothing different about the last stitch. You knit into the front, wrap around, pull through the loop, and then drop your last stitch, tighten up a bit, and now you have another completed row. And you can kind of see the beginning of garter stitch here. I'll show you a more completed swatch, but basically you'll have these little bumps every other row, and then this is what the edge of your work looks like. And then for garter stitch, the front and the back will look the same on both sides, and you'll see that with our other sample in a second. So with this sample, you can see this is the very beginning of garter stitch. We just have two rows here, and you see the one ridged row. This is a little bit longer sample, so you can kind of see what it would look like as you make more rows of knitting. So like I said, garter stitch will look the same on the front and the back of the work. So with every project that you have, there's a right side and a wrong side. You'll see that in patterns a lot of the time. So you could put a stitch marker on the right side so you remember which side is the right side, but with garter stitch it doesn't really matter. In this case, since you're knitting flat, you have these knit stitches created on the right side, but then when you knit on the wrong side, that creates the purl row. So this is a knit stitch, that's a purl stitch, and tucked in between there is a knit stitch, and so on. And then you can kind of see it's nice and like squishy this way. And then another benefit of garter stitch is that it lies flat. It doesn't tend to curl at the edges. It's just the construction of this knitting pattern. So it's great. So you may not even have to block your knitting at the end, which is washing it. and then laying it flat to dry and pinning it so that it looks the way you want. But with garter stitch, a lot of the time I don't even block, and you can just leave it as it is because it's nice and flat. So there's some of the properties. This is what it could look like once you've gotten a couple rows in.